tell somebody.
This is the best thing I've ever seen.
That. Let's talk about that.
You need this. Listen to this.
Memorable and exciting.
Well, then be less boring.
I'm going to tell everyone. Wait here.
Mighty remarkable, Big Daddy. Remarkable?
Welcome to Remarkable, a podcast for B2B marketers that deconstructs the most iconic moments in film, television, pop culture, and advertising for a single purpose: to give you, the B2B marketer, the same storytelling techniques that the pros use. In each episode, you will learn techniques from Hollywood, Pixar, Marvel, and beyond, from Spielberg's hands to yours, bringing remarkable content ideas to you every single week. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. This is Remarkable. This week, we're talking marketing lessons from Ogilvy On Advertising with the help of our special guest, CallMiner CMO, Eric Williamson. Eric, how are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me on your show.
I am thrilled to have you on the show. I am doing well. We got some cool stuff going on at Caspian Studios, and I'm just so excited to dig into Ogilvy today. I'm so glad that you chose it. So why the heck did you choose Ogilvy On Advertising?
So in thinking a little bit about this show, I was, I work in B2B tech. I'm sure we'll talk about all that stuff in a second, but, I was trying to think of like, what book? And, I kept going through all the reams of boring B2B tech books that, teach you all about demand gen. And, I realized that I've spent most of my time lately thinking more about brand. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more, about why I'm thinking more about that than the demand gen engine. And that made me think immediately of a couple key brand books in my life. And this was one of them. Just earlier on in my career, before I flipped over to the client side, I worked in the ad agency world for over half my career. So a lot of B2C, big agencies working on everything from JetBlue to Google to Microsoft, big brand campaigns. And one book that early on in my career, I just devoured and must have read a few times is Ogilvy On Advertising. And while it's 50 plus years old and, is written from all of his Mad Men years, most of the messages are still very relevant. So I figured it'd be good to dust it off. I found it in my library. So here we are.
Did you find it can you show it on screen?
I can. Looks like, I don't know if that's going to come up backwards or not. But,
yeah.
Is he showing or?
It is.
It is.
All right, cool.
Amazing.
So yes, mine looks like it literally came from a library. I may have taken this from whatever agency I was working at from.
Yeah, that's
library.
epic. That's legitimately amazing.
Sorry about that, Martin Agency, but I probably got it there.
$30 for old Ogilvy.
That's
still
awesome.
worth it. Yeah, and taking a step back, tell us about your role as CMO at CallMiner.
Certainly. So I'm the chief marketing officer at a company called CallMiner. And what CallMiner is an AI-powered conversation intelligence platform. And what that means in human speak, as Ogilvy would say, is our platform ingests every type of conversation, every type of interaction that companies have with customers, chats, calls, everything. It analyzes that using artificial intelligence and machine learning. And that informs the guidance it gives to an agent in real time. That informs the virtual agent that is now on our platform that then is having conversations with those customers again. So it's kind of a full circle.
Meredith, what the heck is Ogilvy On Advertising?
So stepping back to talk about David Ogilvy first, he's known as the father of advertising, and he was a British advertising exec and businessman who founded the agency Ogilvy and Mather in 1948, which is now just called Ogilvy. So yes, it's still around, of course. But Ogilvy On Advertising was a book he wrote and originally published in 1983. And it's considered sort of a primer on advertising. And in it, he details his approach to advertising and marketing, which he said was shaped by having gone to George Gallup's Audience Research Institute. So he's from England, but this was in New Jersey. And there he learned to do really meticulous research as a first step before doing anything else. It was one of the rules he followed when writing, specifically when doing like copywriting. And in a letter from 1955, he had said, I'm helpless without research material. I spend a long time studying the precedents. I look at every advertisement which has appeared for competing products during the past 20 years. So he really looks way back, takes a look at everything that's there before moving forward. He was also very, very structured. He said, I write out a definition of the problem and a statement of the purpose, which I wish the campaign to achieve. Then I go no further until the statement and its principles have been accepted by the client. So he's like checking in with the client at every sort of like big checkpoint in his research and in his process. And then he says, before actually writing the copy, I write down every conceivable fact and selling idea. Then I get them organized and relate them to research and the copy platform. And then he says at least like 20 versions of the title, 20 versions of the copy. And he would do just a side note, he would do all of his writing at home. He said, I have never written an advertisement in the office. Too many interruptions. I do all my writing at home. He's like a little bit eccentric, I feel like, too. You get a sense for who he is as a person. And then he says, if all else fails, I drink half a bottle of rum and play a Handel oratorio on the gramophone. This generally produces an uncontrollable gush of copy, which he then goes and edits and edits and edits. But he's also quite deprecating, self-deprecating in his letter too. He finishes by saying, I'm a lousy copywriter, but I am a good editor. So I go to work editing my own draft. After 4 or 5 editings, it looks good enough to show to the client. Altogether, it is a slow and laborious business. I understand that some copywriters have much greater facility. And I sort of share that to say that he himself says this doesn't feel like it comes natural to him. Like he is working and working and working and sort of like just molding and shaping and figuring out and doing lots of brainstorming. So it really is like sheer effort, like it's sweat, blood, and tears. And honestly, like a lot of his process just sounds like gritting through basically like 20 rounds of everything, making sure that you have input from the client at key points along the way. But I think that his like emphasis on preparation, research, client input all still ring true today. But I'm wondering, Eric, how that process you feel like has changed and what you think you would think of our use of AI today in marketing.
Or he wishes he had ChatGPT.
Right.
No, I think any good copywriter is in the agency world, they would call it a planner or a strategist at heart, but so I had to go back and remind myself of some of the themes, but underlying all of the major themes that I always took away from it is his dedication to research and truly understanding the humans he's trying to engage with. And I say that purposefully because, one of his main points is when he's talking about copy is about human emotion, essentially. So he's talking about right for humans because, ultimately that's who you're selling to. That's who you're trying to influence. And all that research is not so much just about understanding the numbers of how many women above 50 are using this product this way. That's part of it, but it's really understanding their emotions and, what are their fears? What are their desires? And to me, even in the B2B world, it's easy to forget that understanding the emotions, pain points, what keeps them up at night, what do they worry about when they talk to their boss every Friday in their one-on-ones? So these are like really strong emotions that you really need to figure out for who your target audience is. And so remembering that you're talking to humans, whether you're doing B2B or B2C marketing. So that to me is one of those things why I picked this book is the fundamental understanding that part is key to the rest of his lessons, which have to do, with copy and some of the other stuff that I'm sure we'll get to. But yeah, I think it stands on its own today. If you just read through it you mentioned that he talks about all these other iconic ads, and most of them weren't even, he had nothing to do with, but he breaks them down throughout this book and he explains why it reflects some of his lessons. So it was one of the things that, early on when I devoured this book, when I was, a million years ago, when I was young and in advertising and trying to figure out what the heck I'm doing, it resonated with me because he did literally break down all these iconic ads that you wish you did.
Yeah. Do you feel like, because you mentioned you've read it multiple times, do you feel like the way he writes is also compelling, aside from the examples are very, very useful, of course, aside
Absolutely.
from that? Yeah.
I think he's very purposeful in his writing. I think he's eloquent, but I think he doesn't over describe much. I think he goes into a lot of detail when he's trying to explain break down those iconic ads, but, a little bit of Hemingway in there where he doesn't, use 2 paragraphs if he can say it in 3 words.
That's cool. I like that a lot.
I think for me, it starts with, as most things do, the title and the cover. And
well, sadly, mine doesn't even have the cover.
I know, right? I was thinking that.
Slip cover.
A couple things. Like, number one, the guy loves black and white. Like, he loves, a lot of his ads feature black and white, single still image of color, and then black and white to get his point across. It's absolutely unhinged that he uses the dash in advertising in the cover. I mean, that's like wild.
I didn't think about that.
I know, it's so unhinged. Why would you ever do that? And it's because it's perfect, right? And then it's just like him with a pipe, it's just like, that's what I want.
Definitely, she hit the nail on the head when she said eccentric, and even eccentric for his time. So in the 80s, I don't know how old he would have been, but he was already an icon at that point. But at the end of the day, like we were talking about, he's a copywriter at heart, copywriter and strategist, clearly, because everything's based in fundamentals. But one of the things that I think is everlasting about what he talks about in here is, and this is a big miss by a lot of people who don't come up through the fundamentals of advertising, is when they hear the word brand, they automatically start thinking logos and visuals. And all of that is secondary to the positioning and the copy. A big idea, a big concept that reflects the brand. And ultimately that usually comes from copy first, almost always, the best ones. A really great, succinct headline that reflects the brand identity comes before you think of any visual stuff, before you think of the picture. He loves photography. But I think that still stands true today and is applicable to B2B, B2C, copy first, research first, copy second, then worry about the visuals.
Yeah. I think so much of his work boils down to simplicity, right? Not overcomplicating the message, not overcomplicating, the thing. He just looks at things from a different way. The Hathaway man shirt, for those of you who have never seen it, which is like this dude with the eye patch. And so it's like, they made this shirt. I don't know the entire backstory, but they made this shirt, the Hathaway shirt. And they put this guy on there, and it says the Hathaway shirt. And it's this guy, and he's wearing an eye patch. And it's like, there's automatically intrigue immediately, right? Where you're just like, it opens that loop for you as the viewer to say, why? Why is he wearing an eye patch? Right.
So one of his fundamentals also had to do with, it was a little bit about the visual, but sometimes it had to do with the copy. And keep in mind, in his day, there was a lot of copy. It wasn't just a headline. The headline was the most important thing in his lessons. But then, if you look through the book, you can see some of these old ads for like B2B or whatever. And there's a whole paragraph of like really well written copy underneath it. But since he's British, I would say he means cleverness, but he really enjoyed humor as a purposeful sense of intrigue in the copy. And in your particular example, it also came through in the visual too. But he loved humor, and I'm sure it was clever British humor. But he tried to inject that in there. That was one of his big lessons.
Yeah, I don't know if the Most Interesting Man in the World commercials, which are one of my favorite ever, I don't know how much they take inspiration from Hathaway Man, but you gotta think it's a lot, right?
Nothing new under the sun, right?
Yeah, that's right. Obviously, I think, from a book standpoint, I mean, I think that obviously so much of it is print advertising, and which does feel dated on a reread, but also not, because look at Instagram, look at all these, every channel we have. There used to be a great thing where you'd go to an area of no cell phone, limited cell phone service, and Instagram's all the photos would turn off and it would just be text, and you go, well, this stinks. I'm not going to watch, look at this. And so I think there's so many lessons in there that are great lessons about, the combination of copy and visuals and how good of a job he did on a bunch of that stuff that are still 100% relevant.
Absolutely. I mean, I think And he's biased because he's a copywriter, but I think this just rings true since I disagree with him about doing everything at home, other than I think that's a nice place to think. But like some of my favorite times that I miss from the agency world is 20 people in a room, and this probably doesn't exist anymore because everybody works remote, but 20 people in a room and there's literally pages all over the wall. And the pages normally weren't visuals. They were like short little succinct headlines that the lead copywriter had written down as big ideas that were now, that could be at the center of a circle of a bunch of other tactics. So that to me was some of the most fun, creative brainstorming that happens at an agency, but it still all revolves around a big, simple, succinct line of copy. Like that's a big idea on how it's articulated. All the other stuff falls out of that. And one of his other lessons I kind of rings throughout the book, but to me, it's one that gets missed a lot on the B2C side. And it's like the only driving thing on the B2B side is like all of this marketing, all this advertising still has to sell something. Yes, you're trying to influence and trigger an emotion and everything we talked about. But if it's not helping get to the sale, then this is a waste of all of our time, and he really, really despised, I think he might have called it like creative for creative sake. And what he was talking about there is, especially with ad agencies, there's a tendency to value going to Cannes and value a agency, a big award over like, did this campaign actually build the brand more and sell more product, sell more services, whatever it is. And that's something I think that gets forgotten when you fall in love with the creativity, which is understandable, but that's not the goal.
Yeah. And I think being top of mind is so valuable, right? So it's like if you can get something and cutting through the noise is so valuable. And I think that his stuff just cuts through the noise so well. I'll show another one, the Guinness Guide to Oysters. I mean, this is phenomenal, right? It's just got whatever.
I was telling her, because I haven't read it in a while, although I did read it 2 or 3 times when I was younger, but I did have to flip back through it. So I'm going to have to go back through it in detail now to catch all these little zingers.
Oh, so good. It's so good. And it just describes Cape Cod, New Orleans, Oyster Bay, all the different types of oysters, and explains it. And I'm like, man, this ad could run tomorrow for Guinness.
Yeah.
That's right?
Yeah. There's
exact same ad could run.
There's like a whole section on foreign advertising and things as well in there, which goes down a whole nother direction in terms of different regulations. But there's a good section of the book that, also is describing his take on how to run an ad agency, how to, build one, how to go win big pitches and things like that, which, fundamentally still have some of these messages in it. But for others who've never heard of this book, you can kind of skip past that part and get to a lot of the fundamentals we're talking about in the back half of the book, where he really gets into what she was saying earlier about research being fundamental, research, being there to get to those emotions, and those emotions driving the copy, which comes first. So I think for anybody who might go get this book later, don't read the first paragraph and be like, well, I don't want to join an agency. You're missing the point.
Yeah. The book is outlined in sort of a funky little fashion. That's so true. Here's another one. This is a Rolls Royce ad. So it shows a photo of a Rolls Royce. And it says, at 60 miles an hour, the loudest noise in this new Rolls Royce comes from the electric clock.
Oh.
Ads. And then it says, what makes is underlined, Rolls Royce the best car in the world? Quote, there is really no magic about it. It is merely patient attention to detail, says an eminent Rolls Royce engineer.
So you think about and given that this was the same time period, probably one of my favorite, period pieces, Mad Men, that iconic sort of scene where he's presenting the carousel.
Yeah, the carousel, sure.
And which is a slide show thing. For those of you who haven't seen this, Google it. But anyways, that made me think of a lot of the ads he puts into this book where, he zooms past, he's talking, he's literally makes one guy cry in this scene. But I'm sure that they based a lot of the Mad Men characters, Don Draper and things like that, based on some of the things that he says in this book. I'm positive.
Without a doubt, yeah. They must have. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like he just looks at things in a different way. He just looks at it. He looks at everything from such a customer-centric viewpoint. From like again, if Rolls-Royce is telling that ad, they're talking about the tires or how it handles, or they're talking about, like, how many ads do you see for cars that talk about handling? And you're like, I don't know what that means. Like, I have no idea what that means. I know what handling means. Like, I know it's like, oh, this car handles better. Like, one of my cars, I have a truck that's, shout out to Nissan Frontier. It handles just awful, right? But but I got what I paid for, right? And that does not stir emotion in me, right? Where you said, if you said the first rock you hit when you're off trail, you're going to feel it. But where you won't feel it is in your wallet. Yeah. Damn, that's a great ad. I just made that up. That's the Nissan Frontier. I'm like, I feel every rock, but boy, is my wallet feel good that I bought one.
But it's right on with all of his fundamentals. And this is what like you're speaking to humans, speak human, don't speak in jargon. And coming from, so I work in tech. I work B2B tech in particular. And it is really easy to fall into a place for a technology company to talk about your tech, talk about your features, and, get into this situation where all of a sudden the next thing you see is you've got 50 headlines that are talking about text and specs. And there's nothing emotional about that. There's definitely a layer of that somewhere in your advertising copy, but that's not the big idea. So I think it's a really great reminder from him that speak human, start there. Don't worry about your text and specs, because your 30 other competitors are all saying the same thing.
I don't know if you've revisited this in a while. The Ogilvy predictions, I got to just rip through these real quick because they're great.
Dude, I didn't go look at that part just because I was like, there's no way he got most of this right.
It's honestly wild. I mean, this is one of the best copywriters, advertisers of all time. And boy, did he have some swings and misses here. Number one, quality research will improve. And that definitely is true. Number two, there will be a renaissance in print advertising. I don't know if that happened, but definitely the internet ate it up. Yeah. Advertising will contain more information, less hot air. I think that's actually a little true in certain ways. I don't know. What do you think?
I think so, just because it's, well, I don't know, at the time that he wrote this, he could contemplate what we're seeing now with, he preceded the internet, but he also preceded social media, which I think had a massive impact on, we're on a podcast, for Christ. I don't know if he would have, contemplated this podcast. So I think there's just a lot of things that he technology-wise couldn't have predicted. I think there's a lot of different mediums of information, but fundamentally as a brand, you're still trying to get out the same message. I think there's just a distribution of that message. There's so many different ways to get that out there, through influencers, through podcasts, through whatever, Instagram, and he couldn't have thought about any of that. Yeah,
I'll do a couple more. Billboards will be abolished.
Honestly, this is what's funny is, and one of the reasons I thought about this book is because, like, in B2B tech, I have lately been finding myself thinking so much about brand, and that has a lot to do with because what's happening with Gen AI is it's disrupting the typical buyer's journey and everything else, and it's making a lot of the classic, boring B2B demand gen engines start to break down. Brand is becoming more important again because it's a big portion of what feeds all the LLMs out there, which build the AI overviews and search and everything else. And funny enough, I've started seeing some of my CMO peers, even in B2B tech, start to do billboards, and of course they're coupling it with people who are taking pictures of it and posting it on social media. But billboards are cool again.
Interesting.
The clutter of commercials on TV and radio will be brought under control. I would say definitively not, and it got way worse. Governments will be using advertising more, especially for health education. Governments definitely advertising more. Advertising will bring population growth under control. No idea where he's going with that. Political candidates will stop using dishonest advertising. It's wild that he even thought that would be possibly true.
Yeah.
That's probably the one he got the worst.
Yeah.
Well, but also, again, shout out to him. But I mean, what rose-colored glasses are you wearing, buddy? Quality and efficiency of advertising abroad will continue to improve rapidly. That's true. More foreign agencies will open in the U.S. and prosper. True. Multinational manufacturers will boost global market share and tailor campaigns locally. That definitely happened, and I think is really interesting. And obviously, the internet accelerates that. Direct response advertising will cease to be a separate specialty and be folded into general agencies. And of course, that half happened, half didn't.
Yeah. I mean, right now, agencies are consolidating upon themselves. To this day, a lot of big creative agencies, most of the biggest ones are owned by holding companies, and they're just sort of like trying to mold them all together to create a bunch of efficiencies. Very much, similar to like how private equity works with the companies they buy. But I don't know that they've split out direct response as an individual thing. I think what I've found,
I think it's still a lot of the direct response separate entity.
Stuff. What's that?
I think it's still a separate entity for a lot of people, but also I think his broader point is that things will be more integrated, and they're way more integrated.
Oh yeah, I hear you. I would say perhaps there's still some separate direct response agencies. It's been a while since I've flipped to the client side, but I was seeing more of the brand stuff. The big brand ideas still stay with big creative agencies, but they were bringing direct response in-house and creating some sort of in-house direct response agencies where they could churn out a lot of creative faster, et cetera. But that may not be the case anymore. So I know for B2B and B2B tech especially, this is why I'm enjoying what seems to be a resurgence of brand a little bit. But, it's almost like 90% what I would consider direct response. When I was saying demand gen, that's very much direct response type advertising where you are spending $1 to get $4 back in one way or another. And you're doing things that are very easily attributed to whatever that tactic was, so that my CFO can say, yep, that was a good dollar spent. Whereas now we're seeing a bigger need to reprioritize brand, which I love.
Yeah, that's right. And the final one, ways will be found to produce effective television commercials at a more sensible cost. Definitely did not happen. And then now it definitely did happen. So he was right eventually on that. Yeah, so, kind of a strange hit rate here and kind of strange predictions. But how bad is this guy that he lays out 13 legitimately wild predictions in the back of his book, and how that's awesome. Taking a stand. I love it. That's so cool.
Yep, I agree. And I'm sure when I read it the first couple of times, I was like, nope, yep. And it's interesting that you brought it back up because there's definitely a few nopes in there now. But very cool. And obviously, I think and thought a lot about the book. It's meant something to me growing up in my career.
Yeah. Final thing, I think this is just like a killer quote. The codfish lays 10,000 eggs. The homely hen lays one. The codfish never cackles to tell you what she's done. And so we scorn the codfish while the humble hen we prize. It only goes to show you that it pays to advertise.
Ooh.
It's probably something he drank or he wrote when he was drinking the bourbon or whatever he said earlier.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, just amazing stuff. It's an amazing book. My final thought on it is that why this book. So he could have written this in a different way. He could have written this as a framework or a model or a take on the world or whatever. I think to juxtapose this with Lean Startup that Eric Ries wrote, right? Which is, don't want to talk about a guy's predictions hit. The guy basically, had every single right idea in that book. As much as you could get right, he got right.
I was gonna say, I think I have that one somewhere over there.
Yeah. Seminal business work that I literally was reading it last night. And I'm just like, it's just incredible. So, and Eric was just basically saying hey, I think that this is true. Not I'm not starting a movement. I'm not starting whatever. I think that this is objectively true. And until someone else comes along and sort of proves it otherwise. And he gets a lot of credit for that. But he was saying I didn't invent this. This is just, I think, objectively true. Ogilvy, totally different thing. And it's Ogilvy on Advertising. And it's lasted for 50 years because it's him and his thoughts. And I think in 2025, if you're going to write a book or whatever, and you're going to go one or the two directions, if you go the framework, big sort of idea route, you better think real long and hard about how that thing is. And the other way of going about it, which is say, this is me on this thing. This is my take on it today. And this might, 50 years from now, everyone might say, this is the stupidest stuff anyone has ever written. But it's your snapshot in time on today and how you view things. And I think that's a very valuable exercise. I think it's also, there's a great quote of this guy, Gibson Biddle, who's the former VP of product at Netflix. He said, nobody cared what I had to say until I started writing. And it's such a great point. Like, he was like, nobody cared who I was. Nobody cared anything about me until I started writing. And I think you can make a really good argument that nobody cared about David Ogilvy. Or I shouldn't say that people did not care anywhere nearly as much as they do about him if he didn't write this book.
I think, and one of the reasons I think it's, I'm glad that I chose it, because I think there's a lot of people who listen to this that probably will have no idea who he is, or, because it's so long ago, but now there's an opportunity to discover him. And to your point, I think he was able to write it the way that he did because at the time he wrote this, I think you said it was in 83, and he's reflecting on his Mad Men days when he was coming up and nobody knew him. So he did already have that, at the time, iconic status when this book was published.
Yeah, Ogilvy and Mathers are already,
of course, yes,
massive at this point.
Exactly, and they're still around, which is iconic enough. But
yeah, seriously,
so he was able to stand on that platform, but his lessons that is his take on advertising still ring true, which is why I kind of thought about it when I was trying to think about what book impacts me still today, because his fundamental lessons still impact how I think. At the time I read it because I was just desperate to learn what the heck I was doing. But I mean, now there's just fundamental lessons that I think every marketer should be reading. So if you don't know who Ogilvy is, you should Google him or go ask ChatGPT about it, and don't just read that summary. Go get the book.
Definitely don't just read the summary, because his actual writing in here is fantastic. That's the other thing, is like he's such a good writer, but the actual writing is fantastic. And then you get to see all the examples and stuff. Also, I got to say, after doing this, I bought this book. I'd read it years ago, but I bought it physically maybe a year ago. And it's fun having it as a physical book. Wouldn't you know? Physical books are fun, especially with pictures.
Yeah, my wife and I always had this dream of like, this is a very small office that I'm sitting in right now, but of like a huge room with all the libraries. So we literally have a storage room full of physical books that we haven't realized that the library yet, but we're going to get there one day. But,
I know. I just need to get a big enough house where I can afford my library.
That's right.
Yeah.
You've nailed it.
I bought, the only thing I bought was the ladder. I'm like, I got the ladder and I'm like, someday I'm going to climb up this and get to the top shelf. I'm just going to pick one off and thumb through it. Meredith, any other thoughts on your end on Ogilvy?
I think in reading his lessons on copywriting, there's just like an overall humanness. Like, he has a sense of humor about his shortcomings. He is just talking like your friend almost. And so that was something that I noticed about his writing that felt way more compelling than just a list of tips, So I feel like that if that can come through in your marketing, I think that'll speak more to your audience than anything.
A playfulness.
Smart, well-written, humorous. There's humor sprinkled throughout it, but it's sprinkled in a really kind of brilliant way. It's not just jokes for joke's sake, or like, he's got the humorous ads that he's breaking down. It's done to help reflect the point he's trying to make in that particular chapter or that section. And again, just like anything else, you mentioned the lean startup, there's 400 other business books which are just drivel, and it's all the same. Today AI could have written that better, but it's the ones that stand out and stand the test of time. And I think that's, this one stands out for anybody who is a advertising or a marketing nerd, that you want to understand some of the fundamentals.
Can I I'm going to show you one more because why not? This is a great one that says how to take out stains. And it lists and it says, use Rinso, apparently a brand, and follow these easy directions. And then it shows grease and oils, blood, coffee, tea, grass, oil paints. And like, gosh, he has this way in his ads of showing you a bunch of different, it's not features. It's like, it's use cases is really what it boils down to. But it's done in a way where you're like, it's so much more approachable and like, so again, like non-jargony. And you're like, if you just see take out tough stains and then you see take out grass stains, the grass stains is way better copy.
Yeah.
It's way better copy. Right.
So there's teams of people that labor over CPG stuff all day long. I know because I used to work on one of those teams for a while. And there's just certain products that you're like, this is the most boring product ever. But if you just go back to the human that's using this product, you're going to find a couple use cases. You're going to find a couple things that really piss her off, whatever the situation is. And that's where the heart of your copywriting should come from, which I think he, reflects over and over in his lessons here.
I think my biggest takeaway from Ogilvy is that he is the king of specificity. And like every ad that he does goes to such a specific location for the viewer that it's like, it's not just like, hey, visit the Bahamas or visit Jamaica. It's like, we sailed to this private cove where we were the only couple. And it's like, John Hammond and, and his wife, Maribel. And you're like, gosh, like, it's just like those little, again, when we see all that sort of stuff now, but it's just, he has this specificity that he uses, like the Rolls Royce, the only thing that you're going to hear, or the loudest thing you're going to hear is the electric clock. It's like these little things where it just like solidifies that point, and it's something that is that you remember. Like that's the thing that you remember, right?
Written so well, like that one in particular, it's written so well that your brain immediately makes the picture of it, and you sitting in there, and it's so quiet. So it's done its job.
But if you wrote that same copy and you said the quietest drive of your life, like that's fine copy. That's like not horrible, but it's not like visceral. You know what I mean? It's
reading a fact. It's not tapping an emotion.
Yeah. Shout out to Ogilvy. Great work.
It's kind of like for mine to be like the most powerful intelligence, interaction intelligence platform. Just stating a fact versus like getting to like, so what?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, that's exactly right. So let's talk CallMiner. Obviously, just experience is changing so much. CX is changing so much. These AI-powered conversation intelligence is like so important for everybody. How are you thinking about your marketing strategy broadly, and like how do you think about brand and content as it relates to that?
Sure. So as mentioned earlier, it's why it made me think of this book is brand is having a resurgence in B2B tech even, which is, I'm very surprised but happy. And a lot of that has to do with, I think the buyer's journey is getting more and more disrupted from the introduction and rapid innovation of Gen AI. The different models that are out there, I think that's becoming some of the new norms for how people interact and research and get information. And a lot of the knowledge bases that those LLMs tap into are very brand-based, things that in a marketer's budget normally would have really been hard for me to justify versus a hardcore demand gen campaign. So brand is having a resurgence. So I'm excited about that. As a company, from a content standpoint, our content strategy, I can break it down into two levels. There's the brand level, which we have our overarching big idea and concept that reflects our brand identity, not the visual part, but the copy part of that. But break it down into key pillars at a brand level. And you're talking about artificial intelligence. You're talking about intelligence, like data intelligence and CX. And at a brand level, the content that's created is more thought leadership. So it's almost like the introduction and us guiding people through some of that versus that next layer down, which is the product level. That's where you start breaking down some of the value and use cases at a vertical standpoint, at a use case standpoint across our platform. And so that's how I think about our content strategy is constructed between the brand and the product level. And one is thought leadership, and one is really more use case and very specific value-based stories that you're generating. So that's content, but it ultimately gets reflected in even display ads, which point to that content. So that's kind of how we have things architected. We do a combination of, classic sort of broad-based inbound marketing. So campaigns and events and different things. But then we also have I think it's a fairly sophisticated account-based outbound motion. And, got to give credits to my head of demand gen. We're doing that even into our customer base. And I'm really proud of the strategy she put together for that, because it's typically you would keep that kind of based on persona and on verticals, but she looked at it a little differently and said, we look at our existing customers based on their health, based on if they're green, yellow, or red. And the different platforms using all these signals indicate, like red is like, they're going to leave us. Green is they're super happy, they're getting value. So she's constructed like what type of content based on those health scores, as opposed to just send all the healthcare ones, these types of things. And those yellows and reds, it's more about giving content that can help fuel adoption more so that they get more value out of the platform. So she's constructed something based on those health scores versus just based on the typical indicators. And I've never seen anybody do that in account-based marketing. And so I'm really kind of excited and proud of her for that. And we use 6 Sense as our platform for account-based marketing. Fantastic company and platform, but they thought it was pretty unique as well. So she's going to be speaking about it at their conference. So I'm excited for her on that. And then what else? We do an annual CX landscape survey.
Yep.
Typical approach. And every year that becomes a powerhouse for us because it's field research, 700 respondents to a survey globally. And that fuels this one landscape survey. But then we have like 20 derivatives that come out of it where we slice the data by vertical, slice it by persona, et cetera. So just, it's a big powerhouse for us.
Amazing. I love the integration of like the content and demand gen piece. And it's so cool. What else is working for your audience?
Well, everybody wants to hear about AI right now, which is understandable. But, as you might expect, it's very noisy out there. There's a lot of AI content that clearly the companies had AI write for them and they didn't do much editing to it. What we've tried to do is recognize that, every company out there that is in our target audience, they are figuring out or heavily investing in AI within their own companies. But the reality is most of them don't truly understand 100% of it. So we've got a layer of our content that where it's almost just AI 101 type education that we're providing, not specific to just our platform. Of course, we sprinkle that in, but the main focus is really just educating them on the difference between the different models out there, the speed at which AI is innovating, and what's different from that from like machine learning. So we've got that layer of content, and then the next layer of content on AI that we have really is more like use case specific and vertical specific, where we're attaching it to our platform as the solution. So that's probably the of those pillars I talked about earlier, that's probably the one we spend the most time and volume of content. But probably the biggest thing I'm excited about, since we were talking about brand, is we recently acquired a company called Vocals, which is a company based out of the Czech Republic. Like literally just 2-3 weeks ago, we announced this. And so what that's added to our platform is it's essentially voice bots and chat bots, and as well as they have live translate. So previously, our company was all about ingesting every interaction, analyzing it, and delivering outputs on the other end in terms of guidance. Now we literally have virtual agents as part of our stack. So it's forcing us in a good way to evolve our overall brand. So when we are absorbing that into what our value proposition is, we have to step back and rethink our actual positioning statement, our actual like brand fundamentals. So we're at the beginning of a fun, basically brand refresh project right now, which is a daunting task, but I'll be looking to some of these fundamentals we talked to get us there.
I love it. Eric, final question here. What's your best piece of advice for CMOs trying to figure out their, content brand strategy?
I think if you're on the B2C side, I think the piece of advice would be, it's easy to get lost in really big brand, big, huge creative ideas that don't sell. But, always remember that you've got to make a connection to selling. And if you're on the B2B side, it's almost like the reverse. So I think take a step back and you listen to some of the advice that we talked about today and truly scrutinize some of your headlines. Start with just the headlines. Do any of them tap any emotions, or is it all just features and specs? So I think do that. And then the last piece would be, how do I do the research that we're supposed to be doing? I'd say if you have like a budget of 0, but you have customers, just go talk to them, especially the happy ones, the green ones. Most of them are more than willing to tell you why they chose you in the first place over your top 2 or 3 competitors. Why do they keep staying with you? What sort of saying that they worry about at night does this help solve for them? So I think you can start with just having a basic conversation. If you do have some money, then use a platform, like ours that analyzes all that stuff. You interact with your customers all the time. So use something that's going to be able to summarize all that for you and give you trends. But start there.
Awesome. Eric, wonderful having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining. For our listeners, if you're in CX, or if your chief customer officer, give them a nudge. Have them go check out CallMiner. Go to callminer.com. Any final thoughts? Anything to plug?
No. Thank you for having me on the show. It's been fantastic.
Awesome. Well, that's it for today. I hope you got some good ideas for your B2B content. Thank you for listening to Remarkable. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. Remarkable is created by the team at Caspian Studios, B2B podcast as a service. Caspian also creates fiction series for B2B companies, so if you want a business thriller, you can learn more at caspianstudios.com. Hollywood-style storytelling for B2B. And in today's episode, you heard from myself, Ian Faison, and Meredith O'Neill, senior producer here at Caspian Studios. Remarkable was produced this week by Meredith O'Neill, mixed by Scott Goodrich, and our theme song is Solomon by Falak. Be remarkable and rise above the noise.